Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Leenock versus VortiX. This is day number 3 of the N4C Main Swiss stage. We're going to see VortiX versus Leenock here in the middle of the Swiss bracket, both players standing at 1-1 so far. VortiX in the first round losing to Beastie QT and then defeating Lucifron yesterday, whereas for Leenock, he took down Mista in day number 1 and then he lost to Beastie QT as well. So both of these players got defeated by Beastie QT. Now they will be battling in the middle part of the bracket. Opening up with game number 1 is going to be Leenock using the Chinese on the left side, and on the right side we'll have VortiX playing as the English in blue. Definitely a surprising opening here for Chinese, and I'm not going to lie, I'm very intrigued to see what Leenock has on his mind with the Chinese, because this map is not Altai, ladies and gentlemen. If this was Altai, you would think that, okay, picking the Chinese is definitely something that you can justify. But this is an open map. And because of that, Chinese is a super interesting civilization selection over here. But I've been praising the Chinese for a long time for their flexibility and their durability. And this is one of the most underappreciated facts of the Chinese, I think. The Chinese are commonly associated with slow-paced maps simply because they have a juggernaut late game. But in reality, the Imperial officers are able to do so much. If you think about it, the Imperial officers are able to accomplish something very similar to the scholars of the Delhi, accelerating your unit production. You can get something similar to the French with the faster villager training if you get the Song dynasty. You can minimize the effect of raids if you place villages with the Song dynasty because you can garrison villagers in there for safety. You can also boost your food, wood, or gold income by supervising your drop-off sites. So there is an insane amount of flexibility associated with the Chinese, and part of the reason why I do believe that Chinese is a very intriguing civilization here is because it's somewhat unpredictable. Now, looking at this matchup in particular, you do have two officers already supervising the lumber camp and the mill here for Leenock. He's not mining gold, so he's going for the good old-fashioned Chinese build order, in which you don't mine gold, you just supervise the lumber camp and the mill, and you're just going to live off from the tax gold. This, however, also means that you are not likely to go for Song Dynasty early on. If you want to go to Song early, you usually mine gold for yourself. And because we're not seeing any gold being mined right now by Leenock, he's using exclusively tax gold income to go up the Feudal Age. He's going to be just playing in Tank Dynasty for the time being. Now, against the English, the Chinese will be able to field a decent composition of potentially horsemen, spearmen, or horsemen archers. Both of those work, and it's going to be very similar to what you would see from a civilization like Delhi, for example. Just flooding those units out, that could be the idea here for our red player. Council Hall on the way here for VortiX. He's got a gold mine up front, which is not nice, but you have to keep in mind that the English are not so reliant on gold in Feudal Age, so it's not the end of the world over here for our blue player VortiX. For now, it's two supervisors for Leenock, and it looks like he's now sending out villagers towards that gold, dropping the Barbican of the Sun over there. So he's playing this one very carefully. He could have started mining gold earlier, so he didn't need the Barbican of the Sun to be able to mine that. Of course, it's going to provide defense against the early longbows, but if he wanted to mine gold earlier, he could have started mining it. It's not like he's moving out towards that gold mine right now, because he's afraid that without the Barbican of the Sun, he wouldn't be able to be safe over there. Although there is two scouts over there from VortiX, so quite a lot of damage could be done on those villagers. Barbican of the Sun is being built rather fast because Chinese villagers are building buildings quite rapidly. But as you see, a villager has to be called off from the building duties for the time being because the scouts are harassing him. You have to be careful here for VortiX, however, because once that building is complete and the villagers jump inside, you could easily lose one of your scouts to the fire of the Barbican of the Sun. Barbican now complete, villagers will probably jump inside, and indeed now the scouts will disengage. Some woes are coming up from the left side. This will make sure that Leenock isn't going to get surprised by 2 or 3 longbows flanking from the left side. Meanwhile, he's just going to continue supervising the mill and the lumber camp, which to me tells me that he wants to go for horsemen if there is any kind of pressure coming his way. If there is no pressure, then it's likely going to be Song Dynasty straight away, and you could see for a brief moment a stable was being dropped, and it looks like VortiX is going to play this one very aggressively. He's going to play with a forward tower, already pulling a villager with just 2 longbows escorting it. Now, this is a little risky here, because as you see, the Chinese are super flexible, and guess what? You start supervising the stable, and you can get a bunch of horsemen out in just a blink of an eye. And you gotta wonder if VortiX was aware of those stables before he started thinking about the forward tower, because now he sees the stables and he's got some spearmen coming in, but the spearmen and the longbows, they move quite slow across the map, so by the time they arrive, Leenock is going to have a formidable force to fight against that. Below the players' webcams, you can also see their heart rates provided by, I think it's Garmin, as you see in the bottom left, a smartwatch company sponsoring the tournament. And Leenock has a very high heart rate. This is one of the interesting things to talk about him. We have seen all the players play, and there are some players like Mista who has a steady heart rate of like 50. Whereas for Leenock, he always has a very high heart rate. Does this mean anything? I don't think so. It just means that he's in a full focus mode for the time being. Gotta love the palings preemptively deployed by VortiX. This will make sure that cavalry can just jump on those archers over here, and it looks like the scouts of VortiX distracted the horsemen enough to allow VortiX to get that tower up. Archers are now moving out. You got 3 archers over here, and you gotta be careful if you're VortiX. That villager is under fire. Still at low HP, is alive, but you got 3 archers over here that might be enough to just come back and pick it off. VortiX probably wants to kill that villager before it finishes the tower. Tower at 70%, but VortiX is not killing the Vil. He needs to go right now. VortiX pulling away the villager for the time being, but it looks like Leenock is going to try and take the fight. Leenock looping around with the horseman. He just needs one good charge, and he's going to get the villager kill here. That's what matters. He's going to lose the army. He did lose 4 archers over here and 1 horseman as well, but the key thing is that he was able to get the villager kill out there, which means that the forward tower from VortiX is going to be ineffective for the time being. You will need to pull a new villager to make it happen. But every second that you delay VortiX's push is going to be a larger and larger window for Leenock to capitalize on the officers supervising his buildings, both in terms of economy and both in terms of military production. Horseman intercepting reinforcements, nice little move over here for Leenock, picks off 1 longbowman and he's going to try and damage a second one. He will be forced away for a time being, but he's going to see the new villager come in and he will be alerted. He knows very well that there's a new villager that will attempt to make that tower. Wouldn't be surprised to see him trying to get some more archers out and once again do the same trick, try to pick off the villager with the archers. Horseman will intercept another longbowman over here, so far Leenock has been very effective with the fights that he has taken. Tower getting close to completion, however, so you gotta respect that. And soon, Leenock would potentially need to fight this one. He's got some forces back at home, and for now, he's denying the villager from getting to the tower. But it looks like VortiX is crawling closer and closer, and I'm not sure if Leenock can take this villager down. There's so many longbows over here for VortiX. He could just pick off the archers, and it looks like Leenock indeed might even give up on that wood line. And that's going to be problematic, because if you look at the backup wood lines, there is basically none. These are basically the remaining wood lines that Leenock could potentially have access to, but both of those are exposed. So losing access to this wood line over here would basically mean that the wood income for Leenock is going to be in trouble. For now, Leenock is launching counterattack with some horsemen and some archers, however, so you gotta be careful with that, because now you're going to see some villagers being exposed for the English player. He's probably starting to mine gold by now, so you will probably have those gold miners exposed to the horsemen and the archers. Looks like Leenock is still trying to intercept those reinforcements, and the archers are sent forward to try and intercept some more. They will pick off the longbow and the spearman over here as well. Love the way that they are focusing on the spearman first, because that's more dangerous to the horsemen. And now VortiX is alerted to the fact that his opponent is pushing his base, so VortiX will have to regroup back at home. VortiX is also mining stone, it seems. Indeed, he's at 190 stone. He's probably using that for arrow slits right now, and he's preemptively dropping a tower right next to that other wood line. Now, this tower is undefended, so the villagers of Leenock could just rush it down, and Leenock has to do it. Leenock has to rush that tower down, but he hasn't reacted so far. He knows about the tower, and now he's pulling the villagers, or is he? Is he pulling the villagers or not? He's sending back the army, but that's going to be too late. You just have to push that villager away, and Leenock is not doing that. He's giving a window for VortiX to finish that tower, and now the horsemen pop out, but is it too late or not? Villagers will try to finish off the Vil here, and they do. The villager goes down here from VortiX, so the tower is not going to be completed, but now VortiX's army arrives on the battlefield. You could see some archers for Leenock helping out tremendously, killing that villager. VortiX's forces are tiny bit sandwiched in between two army groups, however, so there is some horsemen and archers to the north and to the south as well. Army numbers still rather close between the two players right now, but there is no access to wood right now for Leenock, and there is basically no backup wood lines on the north. So accessing wood right now for Leenock is a massive concern, whereas for VortiX, his economy is untouched. VortiX hasn't suffered from a single bit of pressure for the last, 10.5 minutes, which is basically the entire game. VortiX was never pushed, and it looks like we're going to have another sneaky villager here for VortiX. He's going to get that tower up in all certainty. Looks like Leenock is going to find a wood line for himself finally, which is going to be moderately safe. But of course, his position is not great, and it looks like indeed VortiX is not using that stone for additional town centers. He's just using that to get the arrow slits upgrades, and more importantly, the fortification. And with that fortification, it's going to be very difficult for Leenock to take those towers down. Looks like Leenock is grabbing siege engineering, so he wants to just ram those towers down for the time being. And he's going to do that while also getting some raids going inside the eco of VortiX. That's going to be one villager down. VortiX wasn't expecting a counterattack, and he's going to get punished for that. That's 3 villagers down, some spearmen also getting intercepted. And now you're seeing those villagers on the right side also getting raided. English villagers do have bows to fire back with, so it's not going to be a disaster over here for VortiX, especially because he's able to intercept some villagers from Leenock. So Leenock once again struggling to access wood over here because VortiX is just everywhere with those longbows. At the end of the day, it is going to be 37 villagers versus 30, which means that the villager counts are still in the favor of Leenock for the time being, and Leenock is still harassing those villagers out there. The archers, they are actually more dangerous to those villagers than the horsemen are, so as the archers crawl closer and closer, those stone miners will have to make a run for the town center as well. For now, VortiX is actually fighting those horsemen with the villagers, not even garrisoning them into the town center, but so many villagers are going down here for VortiX. He's down to 28. Up north, however, once again, you have the longbows pushing those lumberjacks, and I do believe that Leenock just pulled those away. You can see that group of red units moving over there. Like that red group out there is something that's constantly under attack right now. And indeed, there it is. Some archers are moving up over here, and if you can focus down the spearmen here for Leenock, you can allow those horsemen to charge in here. But so many spears are still out here for VortiX, and VortiX is doing a great job picking off the archers. So once again, Leenock gets forced away from the wood line, and the problem for him is that he went for siege engineering. But can he even afford a ram? Looks like he can. He's got 500 wood in the bank, and he also has quite a lot of food and gold. So the thing here with the English is that your English player is focusing all their efforts into feudal age aggression. All the resources of VortiX are used up for longbow production, spearman production, which means that he's nowhere close to castle age, and as weird as it looks like, Leenock is actually getting closer and closer. Leenock, preemptive tower coming in on his wood line that he's trying to recover. Once he gets a battering ram going, he can start ramming down those towers, and he could still be fine. He managed to push VortiX down to 31 villagers as opposed to 39 of his own, which means that the villager advantage right now is on the side of Leenock, but of course, villager efficiency is a different question, and the villager efficiency is on the side of VortiX by a massive margin right now. Also worth noting that the Imperial officer is going to constantly walk out to all of those exposed drop-off sites, those lumber camps you're looking at. And that means that the Imperial officer could be intercepted. That's one of the problems with that officer. It won't hesitate to go out onto the battlefield to collect tax, and it can just be killed by the longbows like that. Horsemen launching counterattack once again as VortiX is looking to do some damage on those lumberjacks. 5 villagers were garrisoned into the tower, 1 villager went down thanks to those longbows, but there's the retaliation potentially coming in from the south. You can see that group of horsemen looping around, and that would be a great way to counterattack this. Leenock is completely out of food, by the way. I assume that he ran out of berries, he ran out of hunt, and he cannot afford farms. Remember, he doesn't have lumberjacking, and now the lack of wood is affecting his ability to farm. And what it means is that he's going to be stuck at 0 food per minute, meaning that he won't even be able to make villagers, so that villager count differential is going to disappear. In fact, look at that. It's already gone. 30 villagers for Leenock, 34 for VortiX, because VortiX was picking off those villagers left and right. Now there is a chance for redemption. Leenock could potentially get a nice counterattack in here with those horsemen, but behind this one, the lumberjacks are just getting picked apart, and the extra range of those longbows are really coming into play here, because that is allowing VortiX to just fire upon those villagers from a greater distance. Here come the horsemen, however. This is going to be a nice retaliation here. VortiX swiftly the reaction. He's going to jump back into the town center. He's going to lose 2 villagers here potentially, but I do believe that Leenock's villagers are also being fired upon by the tower, so if you look at the attack notifications, it's constantly going off. But one thing that Leenock might not be noticing is that that tower isn't just shooting at the lumber camps, it's shooting at the villagers. And that's a problem for Leenock right now, because Leenock is at 25 villagers, he keeps losing vills, and right now the longbows are idle, so I don't think it's the longbows. It's probably the tower killing those villagers, something that Leenock might not even be noticing. The longbows also moved up and they just keep picking off villagers. You move to the left, the longbows will kill you. You move to the right, the tower is going to kill you, and there's just nowhere to go for Leenock. 24 villagers as opposed to 30. And there is going to be a nice counterattack once again by the horsemen, but slowly but surely, VortiX is grinding down the economy of his opponent. Leenock looks like he's back on track with the food economy, but he's still yet to clean up those towers, and now you're seeing a battering ram come in here for VortiX. Leenock doesn't really have the army to fight that, and it looks like Leenock is just going to try and mass migrate his villagers to the north, trying to find himself a wood line. That's a solution that could have worked a little earlier as well. Because if you think about it, the English don't have great mobility, so you could have used that as an advantage. You can just move to isolated parts of the map and make sure or hope that the English can't find you there. For now, VortiX is going to be focusing on keeping his own food eco alive while also pushing the base of Leenock over here. 14 army versus 34 right now. Leenock heavily outnumbered, and as you see now the battering ram is poking away at that tower. That tower is going to be taken down, and the second tower will soon follow. And there is a second battering ram as well for VortiX, who could soon switch his attention towards the base of Leenock here. Leenock surrounding the town center with farms, but that's his entire food eco over here. And the problem right now for Leenock is that while the villager count is still relatively even, he's got basically no army to defend his base with. For now, it's going to be the two towers going down, but what's more impactful for Leenock is that he's going to be losing his market here. And by losing the market, he could have trouble balancing his eco. And for a player that's being denied off from resources, losing a market is a disaster over here. Scout is going to go down to the town center over here as the Rams are getting closer and closer. For now, they're just poking away at the buildings at the bottom of the town center. They'll probably go for the archer range first, try to take down the production. Lumber camps also being taken down. Now, Leenock could pull villagers to try and burn down those Rams right now, because the army of VortiX isn't really exposed at this point. It's not really close to the town center, so indeed villagers are being pulled, and they are trying to take down those Rams. Rams will be called off, and you see, this is the plan here for Leenock. As long as the forces of VortiX are far away, you can try throwing some torches on those Rams, but it's going to be difficult. Horsemen are now getting closer and closer. One archer range is set on fire. Longbows, however, still keeping distance, and they also have the network of castles bonus affecting them thanks to those towers being nearby. Looks like the horsemen will come in from the right side as well. Leenock is looking to take a decisive engagement over here, but the archer numbers are not spectacular for Leenock, which means that the spearmen will survive for VortiX. VortiX's spearmen still mixed among those longbows. Horsemen will try to take the best fight possible, however, but as long as those spears are over there, they might be able to take a good fight, or can they? That's a lot of horsemen, and you are seeing VortiX's army disappear from the battlefield. A lot of horsemen were taken down by those spears, but it looks like the critical mass was achieved here by Leenock. I don't think he can deal with the second wave, though. This is just too many spearmen, and indeed the second wave is starting to wipe out his horsemen. The first wave was annihilated by all of those horsemen. It looks like a critical mass was there for Leenock to take that fight, but after that, spearman reinforcements came in. And when the dust settles, we're looking at VortiX having 36 villagers and 29 army over just 4 from Leenock. Leenock took a big fight over there. He was probably hoping that there is no more reinforcements coming in, and he can just get some breathing room here by taking down that army, but he wasn't really able to. Trying to intercept some reinforcements, but at this point, with spearmen poking away at his last remaining horseman, and with Rams rolling closer and closer to his town center, you gotta wonder when he's going to tap that GG button, because I don't think there is a way back into this game for him. He's going to try and take down that weak ram with the villagers. Indeed, there is going to be one ram going down, but the longbows will pick off the villagers. If not, then the ram is just going to take down the town center slow and steady. Leenock is going to try and once again regroup over here, but the steady reinforcement recall from VortiX is going to prevent him from really building up a large army, because Leenock will always be forced to fight. And let's not forget, we're looking at a stronger and stronger English farming eco being built up by VortiX. So while the food income per minute right now is comparable for the two players, of course, VortiX is going to be much more happier when it comes to farming compared to Leenock. Villager count still heavily in the favor of VortiX 38 to 31.
Beers full on.
Villagers and horsemen once again pull to take down the battering ram. Longbows will open up against them. Spearmen trying to join the fun over here. Longbows will ultimately focus down the villagers. That's the best thing that you can do right now. Only one villager gets picked off. But once again, Leenock is forced to take a fight. He had to pull out with some horsemen. He had to pull out with some archers to try and fight this one. And as you see, the town center is now on fire. And with longbow numbers out there for VortiX, he can commit underneath that town center. And he can just say, okay, I'm willing to lose one or two of my longbows, because I know that I will be destroying your town center if I do. And he's going to start picking off the villagers that are sent to repair the town center. Leenock is already behind by 17. Leenock garrisons the town center with the villagers. And with that, the longbows, the moment the villagers pop out, they will all be taken down by the longbows. Leenock is now in a very difficult position. Free army only, he's trying to take down the battering ram, but the ram finishes off the town center, and Leenock is going to tap out of the game. Leenock trying to hold here with the Chinese, but ultimately he wasn't able to stop those towers. And that's what decides things here. All of his wood income was towered, and he was always just running for his life. Never in this game, really, he had a safe eco. And that's something that he never was able to recover from. He had some good raids going on, but ultimately, VortiX was able to control the resources. And one of the key things that I wanted to highlight is that by cutting off Leenock from wood, VortiX was able to cripple his food economy as well. Because VortiX had the farming going for him. And when Leenock ran out of berries and hunt, Leenock wasn't able to add farms because he didn't have the wood to do so. And with that, VortiX is going to be able to take game number 1 over here. We'll be going to the first home map of Leenock. He pulled out the Chinese on game number 1 Arabia, and I wonder what exactly his plan was, because we didn't really see what his game plan was in this game. He was always just reacting to the English here. But now we're going to the first home map of Leenock, which could be an open map like Highview, or a closed map or slower paced map like Altai. Welcome back to Leenock versus VortiX. We're jumping into game number 2 on the first home map of Leenock. Spawning in on the right side is going to be Leenock playing as the French in red. And on the left side, it is VortiX playing as the blue Mongols. The map seems to be Highview, although we could get a clearer picture if we had the overall map looked at instead of the POVs. As you can see, however, from the POVs quite clearly, Leenock is operating with 2 scouts over here, so he's making a run for all those sheep spread across the map. And you can see a blue dot up north. I do believe that's the Khan, and I still believe that the base position for VortiX should be around over here. You can see the neutral market spots, and this is actually very helpful for Leenock, because the players usually don't spawn very close to those neutral markets, so you could get a clue that indeed your opponent is going to be here instead of, let's say, over here, which is technically not impossible if you just look at the random map script itself. Indeed, there is VortiX on the left side playing as the Mongols. His Ovu spot is going to be very far away from the town center, but his town center is very close to the food line and the gold mine. And one of the things that you have to consider is that if your town center is close to the wood and the gold at the same time, you don't have to make a Gur in Dark Age, which could accelerate your Feudal Age, but that's not on the menu right now for VortiX. Instead, he's going for Spearman Aggression, which is a great way to deal with the French. This is a tough civilization matchup for the French, because obviously the Mongols are great when it comes to early aggression, great when it comes to denying resources, and the French want to play with their knights, they want to play with their archers, but especially their knights could be problematic to make if you lose access to your gold mine. And what a better way to deal with French than to just send in spearmen, deny the gold mine, and even if your opponent gets to Feudal Age and makes 1 or 2 knights, it's going to be insufficient because they won't be able to take down spearmen. Leenock took a beating on one of his scouts, but he gets away with full HP, and it looks like he's going to get some benefit from that extra scout added, because he's going to have quite a lot of sheep to work with, and look at that. Sneaky villager already moving up, not even escorted by the spearmen. The villager left a lot faster than the first spearmen were made, and indeed the map is Highview, which also means that we have a lot of stealth forests. And in these stealth forests, it's very easy to hide villagers, it's very difficult for the opponent to spot these forward units. And because of that, it is very, very difficult for your opponent to diagnose that there is such an early tower rush coming your way. Now, you're playing against Mongols if you're Leenock, so you should expect a tower rush, but of course, it's going to be a little difficult to see where that is coming from. Now, one thing that Leenock is having in his favor, at least for the time being, is that VortiX has poor scouting of his base. VortiX is yet to scout the gold mine, he's seeing the lumber camp, but the thing is here that you want to deny the gold. Tower coming in right now for VortiX. This is the second game in a row where he's playing with Tower Rush, by the way. He played the previous game with the English towers, now he's playing this with the Mongol towers, and I do believe that Leenock has no idea about that tower coming up. Now, the good news is that you will have access to gold, which means that Leenock won't be cut off from his most important and easiest to deny resource, so to say. But on the other hand, you will have to consider something else. The berries will be denied. Now, because Leenock was able to get quite a lot of sheep, it's not going to have an immediate effect. But if this game goes long, or well, it's likely going to go long, but if that tower remains alive for a long time, then food denial could be a big factor here for VortiX. Scouts are being sent to the south right now to discourage that Khan from harassing the villagers, and you can see that Leenock is building that school of cavalry with 7 villagers. He wants to get up to Feudal Age as fast as possible, and his immediate reaction is going to be an archer range. He knows fully well that the knights won't do anything against those spears. The spears will just jump into that tower. For the time being, this could be actually more problematic for Leenock than I thought, because one thing I did not consider is that by denying the access to wood, how is Leenock going to make archers? You can have the gold, you can make knights, but those won't work well against the spearmen. But what if you deny the wood? How is Leenock going to make archers? Archers are a very wood-heavy unit, so you already lost access to that wood line out there, and if you get the other wood line towered, Leenock could be in serious trouble. Imagine a tower over here right now, that would deny the other wood line. Of course, there is still some backups over here on the left side, but being able to deny the wood line to the right of the current one would basically mean that Leenock would struggle to access wood. You see, he's taking stragglers right now, and he's dropping the lumber camp as we speak. First archer is now coming out, which means that VortiX no longer has the chance to sneak a tower up there, because the villager would likely just get picked off by the archers. And indeed, VortiX is calling off the villager. He's got 2 pastures working for him right now, underneath the town center, not affected by the Ovu, and he's about to click up the Feudal Age right now. So the question becomes, how is VortiX going to continue here? Because in many cases, you see the Mongol player just trying to go for a fast castle after such a Dark Age aggression. Although this wasn't a huge Dark Age aggression and it's not a lot of damage done, so you might not want to risk going fast castle over here. In that case, Horseman Spearman will be your friend, because that's a unit composition that's capable of beating the French knights and archers, especially given the fact that Leenock is only going for 1 or 2 archers. You see, it's a minimal investment into army so far from Leenock. Looks like the scouts were trailing the Khan over here. The Khan got some damage done on him by the scouts, but now the spearmen joined the party, and you see there is going to be the scouts escaping. The Khan's Feudal Age damage output, in fact it's still a Dark Age Khan because VortiX is not up to Feudal Age, is insufficient to do a lot of damage to the scouts over here, and it looks like we're going to have a professional scouts build over here coming in for Leenock because he's making quite a lot of scouts. Spearmen are back into the towers, so the scouts won't be able to burn it down. Archers trying to pick off one of those spears, and they will be unsuccessful doing so. So for the time being, that tower is going to stay alive. Leenock has 2 archers and some scouts working for him. Although, at this point, those scouts could have been made just to be torch units. When I first saw them, I was thinking about professional scouts, but now I'm doubting myself because he's not carrying in any carcasses. He doesn't even have a mill to research that upgrade on. So it's possible that he just added those scouts as cheap torch units to try and burn down the tower. Lumberjacking upgrade coming in for Leenock. The concern for him right now is that he's letting a Mongol player do his own thing for the next 2 or 3 minutes because there is no aggression coming from Leenock. What this means is that VortiX could do whatever he wants. He can just go Castle Age, and the Mongols will be able to beat you to Castle Age if you're French in most cases. So that would be a difficult situation, although it looks like it's going to be a fast castle as well for Leenock, and he's got a head start compared to the Mongol player out here. So it is possible that we're not going to see a ton of fighting going on in Feudal Age. In fact, it's very likely, and we're just going to see some fast castles going on. There is the professional scouts upgrade now coming in for Leenock. So he is going to play pro scouts. It's a bit of a questionable choice now, however. Because if you look at his resources, he's got a ton of food in the bank, so he's not really in the need of carrying in carcasses immediately, but he's giving up a lot of gold to the professional scouts technology, and that will delay his castle age timing over here, and here come the spearmen. They will just jump on those lumberjacks. I think VortiX realized that his opponent barely has any archers over here, so he could easily get some damage done here, and you see, the Khan is trying to pick off the archer, some more archers are being added, and as the reinforcements come in from Leenock, VortiX is going to pull back his forces. Nice idea from VortiX trying to get something done with those spears. He's realizing that, okay, I got some leftover spears, might as well try to harass the opponent. For now, deer ferrying may begin for Leenock any moment. He's got a ton of food in the bank, little low on gold, whereas on the other side, slightly lower resource bank as well for VortiX. We do have an attack notification going off close to that Ovu, so I wonder what exactly that is. It could just be one of the scouts trying to burn down the Ovu, being annoying. Nope, not even that. Could have been a wolf then. Yeah, it's probably a wolf because one of the villagers are a tiny bit damaged and there is no one nearby. So I'm suspecting it was a wolf that attacked the villagers. Villagers turned back, stabbed it down with the spears. That's about the appropriate amount of HP that you would lose for a wolf over there. And that was a barracks being built for a brief moment. Now it will be changed to an archer range for Leenock. Leenock is yet to bring in the first carcass. He's ferrying those in as we speak. This is something that will be spotted by VortiX, who's just super annoying with that Khan. Look at that. He's trying to pick off those archers, which might not seem significant, but even just 1 or 2 less archers could be a deciding factor in a key battle. And he was able to pick off 2 or 3 archers so far, but now the scouts will just swing their hammers and they will take down that Khan over there. Scouts versus scouts do a lot of damage, and scouts versus Khans also do a lot of damage. That's one of the interesting scenarios of a Khan. A Khan doesn't do bonus damage versus scouts, but scouts do bonus damage versus Khans, which means that if they can get close, the scouts are very dangerous to a Khan, especially a low HP Khan like we could see. This being said, VortiX is ready to get to Castle Age, whereas his opponent Leenock is already on the way to Castle with the Guild Hall. step it up. No surprise over there for VortiX as his Castle Age progress begins. And it looks like we're going to have a defensive tower up on that other gold mine. Leenock has been mining gold for a long time, so I'm suspecting that he's running low on that gold mine at the back, and he's preemptively towering the one on the front to prevent any kind of aggression from denying it. Now, what is the unit composition here for Leenock, though? Because one thing that neither of these players have currently is vision on the opponent's moves. I do see 2 archer ranges and 1 stable. Could this be Mangadai? It would be a little surprising if it was, but this wouldn't be unprecedented. We have already seen Mangadai at least once in N4C. It was exactly once, to be precise. Double stables right now for him. It seems like it's just going to be Crossbow Lancer for him. Arbaletier will be added by Leenock. You can see it on the right side. He's also grabbing the Gambeson's unique tech as we speak. Scouts will pick up the hunt belonging to VortiX as well. VortiX won't really care about that, of course. He's just working with the sheep, of course, with the Mongols. He doesn't care about the berries. He doesn't care about the hunt at this point. And it looks like it's going to be just full archers here. Now, the Arbaletier will work quite nicely against the knights, but if there are some horsemen also mixed in for VortiX, that could be a little alarming for Leenock, especially given the fact that Leenock doesn't have a barracks to make spears on. So horsemen could actually come as a nasty surprise here for Leenock. Leenock also expanded towards the berries on the south, and it looks like to the north, we are not seeing any army come out from our blue player VortiX just yet. He's adding lancers, and the archer upgrades are coming in, so it's going to be knights and archers. Siege Workshop coming in preemptively for Leenock. He knows what's coming. He knows very well that the Mongol player will try to establish a forward foothold and then try to just use that as a staging ground, make siege weapons on the front. And with lancers, archers, and some mangonels, that would be difficult to deal with for the French. So what does Leenock do? He's going to preemptively add a siege workshop so that he can start making springboards as a preemptive response to those mangonels. Now that lumber camp close to the initial woodline of Leenock is almost set on fire, and that's going to give some resources to VortiX when that happens. It's constantly being fired upon by that initial tower, and that's going to be some nice extra resources for VortiX to work with. Once again, the Khan dives in. Now, this is a Castle Age Khan, so it's doing a lot more damage than Feudal Age Khans do, and you can already see one villager was taken down, and the second one almost got killed. It ran to the right, and it survived for the time being. Here's the blacksmith. For now, it looks like VortiX isn't committing a ton of resources to his army. He's just being cheeky and annoying with that Khan. And the most important thing with that is that he's trying to distract the opponent. You see that using that Khan, he's pulling the archers and the Arbaletier to the north. That's the idea here. Because by pulling those Arbaletier to the north, he's gonna be able to swing in from the south, knowing that the opponent has no defense over there. It's actually very unlucky for him that he's bumping into the berry villager over here, because this is going to give an attack notification for Leenock, allowing the gold miners to get back to the town center. If that berry villager wasn't there, the first thing that those knights or lancers would have encountered would have been the gold miners, and there would have been a lot more damage done. Still, quite a lot of idle time here for Leenock. He has to abandon the stone mine as well. He was mining stone, probably thinking about the defensive castle, which is quite useful against the Mongols here for the French. Can slow down a Mongol push, and it could also boost your unit production, of course. Lancers will circle around the base of Leenock right now. He's trying to keep track of them with the Arbaletier. So far, wasn't able to damage those knights at all. And you see, once again on the left side, there is something assembling. Same concept. You force your opponent to this side, and then you can swing in from the other side, because you do have the mobility advantage. And that's the reason why I do believe that when you get to Castle Age, you're always trying to build on that mounted component of your army. Preferably knights. Simply because even if your opponent is going for Arbaletier, you're going to have the mobility component, and the player defending with the crossbows or Arbaletier will have to stay back at home, otherwise they will just get raided to death. A market is being built right now by our French player as we speak. Looks like the Khan was sent to the south, trying to harass those berries, and knights are now swooping around, getting some kills on that stone mine. That's going to be 3 villagers taken down for no retaliation, and now those lancers could get even more gold miners killed. Looks like they won't be super greedy. They will just see if they can get away with 1 or 2 more kills, but now they will disengage upon seeing the villagers jumping into the tower and the town center. First Springald out for Leenock. He's still ferrying in deer, and I do see a monastery as well, so he's probably trying to pick up some relics over here. Leverage the fact that his opponent wasn't really contesting the map control, so far at least. VortiX at 25 army, Leenock at 19, however, and VortiX has been quietly building up some numbers back at home. He's making a mangonel back at home. He will roll through with that mangonel all across the map. VortiX so far playing very patiently. He's using small groups of units to keep his opponent pinned inside his base, harass, pick off 1 or 2 villagers. He's using the Khan as a standalone unit and a small group of Lancers to once again just pick off the villagers when there is no retaliation to be found by the enemy. 1 Springald, 1 Mangonel, supported by some Lancers and Archers, are now moving up for VortiX. 35 army versus 22. And that tower and monastery being so exposed could be very concerning for Leenock, because if those buildings are burnt down, that once again gives some resources to VortiX. And even though it's only 25 gold and 25 food by default, we shouldn't underestimate that. Because building being burnt down is of course a loss to your enemy, and what's more important is that the Mongols are directly benefiting from it. Especially small buildings or weak buildings exposed, like drop-off sites, could be very exposed to such a thing. It is going to be the Knights charging in now. They will take down one of the scouts. But the most important thing is that the Knights could have seen the 2 Springolds. There are 2 Springolds inside the base of Leenock right now, and VortiX is now aware of that. He's going to try and burn down the tower. It's a rather weak building if there is no one garrisoning inside it, so it is just going to get burned down. Arbaletier will force back those knights for the time being, but it looks like Leenock is looking to take a fight here. The Springolds open up here for Leenock. He's going to have the advantage in that fight, but the Mangonel setting up over there, pushing back the Arbaletier for the time being, and now the Archers will commit. Lancers will also commit over here. Volo attempt by our red player is going to fail, and now the Archers are diving deep over here. The Mangonel is still alive, and the Villagers are now also targets of those Archers. Most of the Knights are gone here for VortiX, but his Archers are still alive, and there is absolutely no response here. The Lancers will finish off one of the Springolds before being taken down by the Arbaletier, and now the Archers will just have a free fiesta of slaughtering everything here. Response from Leenock is going to be a couple of men-at-arms, and that's actually a great response over here. Will force the Archers back for the time being. Still, there is 1 Springald that's going to force the Mangonel back, and it looks like Leenock will force VortiX to retreat. But VortiX, of course, inflicting a ton of damage on his opponent, and now you're seeing some crossbows being mixed in as well by VortiX. He knows that now there is some men-at-arms in the army of Leenock, so some crossbows could make some sense. He's also sending in some Lancers around, so raiding is going to soon begin from the southern part. This is looking difficult for Leenock, because he has to keep all of his forces to the north, because he needs to protect that wood line. But down south, you could see some Lancers come in for raids any moment, and I do believe Leenock is struggling with gold as well. Look at that gold count drop. He does have the guild hall set on gold, and he just withdrew like 900 gold from the guild hall, but this is the gold mine. Oops. Well, that's one of the disadvantages of me not handling the camera, but that's the gold mine that he needs to go for. And that is exposed. Look at the other alternative gold mines. Nothing else. Nothing in this corner gold-wise, nothing in this corner. That's the only gold mine that Leenock can access, and he ran out of gold within his base. So the only reason... Oh, actually he found a gold mine at the south. That was a sneaky gold mine I did not see. That's going to be life-saving for Leenock, because boy oh boy, without gold would he be in trouble. He wouldn't be able to get Springolds going, and then he just gets overrun by siege. Springolds once again opening up against each other. It's a 1-for-1 for the time being, but of course numbers are still looking better for VortiX, and the second Springold for our blue player is gonna get taken down, traded off by VortiX over here for 1 from Leenock. Leenock is now also adding his own Mangonels, but of course it's a little easier for the Mongol player to reinforce this battle over here for the time being, thanks to the fact that he can just build the siege weapons on the battlefield. The tower is going to have a Springald emplacement placed on it, and that's going to help immensely. Taking down heavy units like the Lancers will also be quite helpful against siege weapons, but you gotta wonder how long this tower is going to stay up against Mangonel shelling. For now, Leenock is still holding 7 villagers lead, however, for the Mongol player. And the really alarming thing right now for Leenock is that a significant portion of his eco is exposed. The Mangonel gets taken down for no retaliation by the Bruce Springolds. That's a big move over there, because now there is no Mangonel for Leenock. Leenock is pushing up into this alley over here. The tower is still standing strong, but almost set on fire. And once it's on fire, it's going to burn down to the ground in just a matter of seconds. Springolds will trade blows against each other, and it looks like the defense upgrade is going to be popped by the Khan here. Mangonel opening fire on those crossbowmen as the crossbows are getting forced back. 1 Springold still alive over here, being repaired by the red villagers out here. Leenock trying to make a stand here, but you gotta wonder how long he can hold this one. He killed the Khan, which is a great value here, and it looks like he's gonna be able to force VortiX back for the time being. Huge hold here for Leenock, but he had to sacrifice quite a lot of units for this one. Lumberjacks were idle throughout the entire process. If you look at Leenock, he wasn't able to chop wood on this lumberjacking site for a long time, and for a brief moment you could see him buying the wood from the market. So the only reason why he actually has wood in the bank, and the only reason why you see that wood income being still around 700, is because, first of all, he was buying a ton of wood, and now he's readjusting his villagers to the other forest. He has a second town center going, and that's going to help compensate for the villager losses, however. And you get the feel that this push is somewhat stalling out here from VortiX. He is only ahead by 5 villagers now, he's 1 town center, and the most important thing is that he wasn't able to finish Leenock off. And now, you have minimal mobility as well for the forces of VortiX, so Leenock can get away with those outlying resource deposits, like these over here in this corner. Springolds once again in large numbers for both sides over here. They will just trade some shots over here, as for now it's 3 versus 2. Men-at-Arms and Arbaletier being mixed in here for Leenock. Quite a lot of crossbows on the battlefield now for VortiX. The newly built Springold gets taken down immediately. It's still 3 versus 2 on the Springold department, and you have more Springolds queued up for Leenock. At this point, VortiX realizes that he should just burn down that monastery, because that would give a nice edge to him when it comes to, once again, gathering the relics here, because VortiX already started picking up the relics himself. He's got 2. Leenock has 0. Leenock has 1 relic right next to that forest over there that he almost managed to bring in. But ultimately, the monk got picked off, so Leenock is still sitting at 0 relics right now. Leenock mining stone like a madman, so I'm suspecting that we're going to see a defensive castle coming in very soon. Only 1 mangonel right now for VortiX, so it's going to take some time to take down those buildings, because the Springolds do minimal damage against those buildings. Archers' crossbows also don't do a ton, so it's going to take some time to burn down those buildings, but the monastery is down, which also gives a nice edge for VortiX, because now that Passage is a lot more open. Before that, it was a narrow choke point. Now it's a lot more open, Passage, so he can capitalize on his larger number of Springolds, and he doesn't need to run into a narrow causeway where he could get slaughtered by mangonels that he is probably expecting Leenock to have. Leenock doesn't have a single mangonel right now, however. Instead, he's just massing up men-at-arms in large numbers. And there's the defensive castle coming in here. You gotta wonder if this goes up, however, because the mangonel is ready to fire over here, and this might be a little overly ambitious here by Leenock. He's got like 20 villagers building that keep, but no army to protect them, and indeed, the villagers will get forced back for the time being, and this keep, now even if you cancel it, you're going to lose some resources on it, so that wasn't great for Leenock. You see his stone count dropped to 600. If you cancel the keep before taking any damage, you are going to get the full refund, but if it takes damage, you get way less as a refund, and now Leenock can't afford a castle over here. Narrow choke point once again for those archers to set up in. Springolds will trade shots against each other, but Leenock is going to lose his Springolds, and now you get the feel that VortiX is trying to leverage this momentum. He realized that his opponent tried to make a defensive castle. He's trying to take a fight before that castle could potentially become a reality, trying to go underneath that town center. The town center is focusing down the Khan over here. Khan still alive at high HP. Tower being burned to the ground as we speak. Looks like the Khan is gonna get picked off over here because VortiX isn't paying attention to it. Leenock is fine giving up on that tower, especially given the fact that he's able to take down some siege from the opponent with that Springold. The Khan goes down, and Leenock is just patiently waiting for the decisive fight over here to happen. Once again, Leenock struggling to access wood, however, so part of the reason why VortiX is so resilient to push this side is because he's fully aware that his opponent is struggling to access wood. Another castle is going to be attempted over here. Leenock might have not seen those forces in the stealth forest, however, and there is some mangonels here to open fire on those villagers. This could be a disaster here for Leenock. He's building that castle with 15, and there is 2 mangonels ready to set up and fire on those villagers, and there's just nothing for Leenock that stops that. Mangonel gets the first volley out, villagers getting killed left and right, and now the archers, lancers also moving in. Can that castle be finished? The mangonel fires again, kills all the villagers underneath the castle. That is going to be a castle stopped at 90%, and now the Springolds from Leenock pushing up here, taking down the first mangonel. More villagers being pulled by Leenock. He needs to finish this castle, and he will. After taking out the mangonels, he was able to send some more villagers. But what's the price of that castle, you gotta ask? It is 60 villagers over 76. So many villagers gave their lives away for that castle for Leenock, and you gotta wonder if this is going to give enough breathing room for Leenock here. VortiX, still resilient, wants to go for another push over here with the Rams. And once again, Leenock is gonna have to make a stand at that castle. Only 17 army for Leenock against 60 from VortiX. VortiX would overrun the base of the opponent so easily. In fact, he should change the angle of attack and just go straight into the base of the opponent. Could be from this direction, or could be from this direction. There are so many houses that he can burn down, and those would give tons of resources for him, and it would cause tons of problems for Leenock. For now, VortiX is able to capitalize on that map control because he's able to pick up the relics, he's able to spread his villagers around for resources. Whereas one thing that you'll have to consider is that Leenock is slowly running out of resources in that bottom part of the map. And once again, he's going to be starving for gold. In fact, he's got 0 gold per minute. He's out of gold. Well, he's not out of gold, he's got resource bank right now, but he isn't able to get more gold for himself, and there comes the push from the central part. Lumber camps, houses exposed. That's exactly what you want to burn down with those rams, because that's going to give you a ton of resources, but more importantly, you could go for the production buildings, especially that siege workshop would be immensely valuable, because that's the only thing that allows Leenock to get some springolds on the battlefield. Rams now knocking on the doors of that archer range, and you see there's a new springold being built right now by Leenock, and it looks like it's going to be a full commitment now for VortiX. He's feeling the blood in the water. He's realizing that his opponent doesn't really have the chance to stop a direct push over here, and the springolds of VortiX will take down the springolds of Leenock. Now, knocking on the doors of that siege workshop are the 2 battering rams. New springold pops out, immediately taken down by the ones of VortiX. And with that siege workshop gone, Leenock has no response to those mangonels, no response to those springolds, and not even a response to those battering rams right now. Leenock is losing that siege workshop, and after that siege workshop, you gotta start burning down the houses if you're VortiX, because if you burn down the houses, you could cause serious problems for Leenock. He won't be able to make army here because he will be housed forever. Or he could just go push that starting town center straight away. Town center under fire. You do have sacred sites also being captured right now by VortiX. And you see Leenock is trying to take a decisive fight over here. He's trying to mass an army, but he's still at 24. And the numbers of VortiX are increasing a lot faster than the numbers of Leenock are. Leenock is going to struggle to take a fight here. 173 population, over 103 here. Battering rams now working away on that barracks. And Leenock will have one decisive fight that he could potentially take here. He gets a new siege workshop and gets some more springolds out, so he will have a chance to take down those battering rams with. And there was no reaction so far from VortiX, so VortiX is going to lose one of those battering rams, potentially both of them. But he sets another barracks on fire, and he's also burning down the starting town center. There is a counterattack coming in. This counterattack on the northern side of the map could actually be very impactful. We have no idea what kind of units those are, but that could be quite big here. If Leenock is able to do a lot of damage over there, there might be a glimpse of hope, but holding this position inside his base is going to be very difficult, and you see the infantry is building a trebuchet. That's not even a counterattack. That's some very sad lumberjacks being sent north to chop trees. Oh boy. That's a problem for Leenock. Because VortiX obviously will see it, and VortiX has the capability of sending some army over there. Leenock doesn't have the forces to spare to send over here. It's a friendly lumberjacking operation right now, soon will become a slaughterhouse, because you're just going to start seeing those red villagers fall to 1 or 2 knights from VortiX. VortiX now taking down another springgold, and he's burning down the guild hold. He also has a trebuchet, and Leenock taps out. He knows that he can't stop this force. He can't build up his numbers, and his opponent already has 100 army inside his base. And with that, VortiX takes a very confident game number 2 as well. Once again, you get the feel that he's got the civilization advantage. Mongols have a great matchup against the French, and this was a tough matchup here for Leenock. The problem is that now he's down 2 games, and well, it's the middle part of the Swiss bracket. If you lose this set, you will fall down to the lower parts of the bracket, and you will be rather close to the elimination positions. So obviously this is an important set for both players, and right now it's a 2-0 for VortiX. Leenock needs to get everything together for game number 3, which will be on Altai, so a massively different map from game number 1 and 2, but this has to be a win here for Leenock, because one thing that we have to mention is that in the Swiss stage, it also matters how many games you win. So getting defeated 3-1 is still better for the loser than getting defeated 3-0. So obviously every single win matters here for Leenock, but the most important thing would be to try and come back into this set. All he can hope for is a reverse sweep. Let's see how he does on Altai. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to game number 3 in between VortiX and Leenock. We're moving on to Altai, which is the second home map of Leenock here. Spawning on the right side is Leenock playing as the English in red, and on the left side you're going to have VortiX playing as the French in blue. So another English versus French matchup, one of the most common civilization matchups in Age of Empires 4, but a civilization matchup that you don't normally expect on a map like Altai. Altai is traditional an English map, so we have often seen English mirrors, But it's also a map where Chinese can be quite relevant. Of course, Leenock has already used up his Chinese, so that's not an option. The thing that's more surprising is VortiX picking French over here. Back in the good old days of Altai, in the early days of Age of Empires 4, as the scout just barely gets away here for VortiX, he's lucky to keep that alive. So back in the early days of Age of Empires 4, French was a popular pick over here because French have a powerful economy, great all around, and it allows you to play a somewhat defensive game, yet still contest the map control, harass the enemy with 1 or 2 knights. But the most important thing is that you have a great economy, and then a good late game, and you can utilize that against most other civilizations on this map. So really, the French is a good all-around civilization for this map. However, French are usually used on open maps nowadays, simply because there are some better civilizations for this map. Potentially the English, potentially Delhi, HRE maybe, Chinese is a very common pick here. So you gotta wonder what exactly the plan is here for VortiX. Leenock seems to have a slight civilization advantage here for the time being. Both players operating with 2 scouts over here. VortiX barely getting away with that low HP scout of his. But it looks like he will be able to keep it alive. And looking at the sheep numbers, those seem to be relatively even, so both players rather successful gathering the sheep from the outer rim of the map. Looks like Leenock is still trying to find an angle to kill that scout. As I mentioned in one of the previous games, scouts versus scouts do bonus damage, so this scout from VortiX is 2 hits away from dying from the opponent's scout, but it looks like he's going to get back home. Of course, the 2 scouts have the same movement speed, so there is no way for Leenock to catch up with the opponent's scout here. Looking at the bases of the players, let's talk about that for a brief moment, because one of the things that's a little concerning for the English on this map is the lack of wood. And in general, that was a thing that was haunting Leenock in this entire set so far. Game number 1, having your wood access denied. Game number 2, having your wood access denied as well. And on this map, you only start with 2 forests. So you see, there are 2 to the southern part of the map here for VortiX. And for Leenock, he's got both of those on the front. Now, it helps a lot for him to wall off his base, because as you will see over here on the minimap, there is a chance to wall here. Of course, you can wall off your right side without any major problems. And there's the second forest to the north of the first one, and that allows you to once again to wall your base rather easily, and this would give you a lot of breathing room. Right now we are at the POV of VortiX, so we're seeing what he scouted. He's got a very thorough scouting, as you see. He's got like 80% of the map scouted, but what I wanted to highlight is the walls that Leenock can make like this. Very nice and compact base with 1 berries at the back, gold at the back. The only concern for you is wood control, but you can't really do much about that other than making army and then contesting map control. Looking at the base of the opponent, if you look at VortiX, he's got a gold mine at the back, hunt at the back, those are both safe. And he can also wall up quite easily. This would be the most reasonable wall for him, because this way he would have a wood line that's impossible to attack. He could go for a little more conservative walls, but that would potentially expose this wood line over here to the left side. Which means that these would be the most reasonable wars for him, and he has to respect the fact that the English will go for a lot of aggression over here, probably with spears and archers. And indeed, there come the spearmen, there come the archers over here, barracks and council hall being dropped right now as we speak by Leenock, whereas on the other side you do have the stable, or well, the school of cavalry to be precise, being dropped by VortiX. The question is, what exactly is his game plan going into Feudal Age? Because in this matchup, the French usually have a tough time. Spearman and archer flood from the English is tough to stop with the French, so I'm curious to see what the game plan exactly is for VortiX. Neither of the players are mining stone, which means that we're looking at 1 town center builds as things stand, although that could change in the near future, especially for the French player, because one of the things that the French could potentially try doing here is go for a 2 town center build and just play very defensive. Potentially defensive towers and some knights being made could make the trick. Because one thing that you could do is that if you play with multiple defensive towers for the French, then the English will have a tough time committing against them. You don't really want to run into tower fire with spearmen and longbows. Of course, the English can add the siege weaponry, but that takes some time to research and build. And then you could use some of your cavalry to potentially just try to snipe the siege weapons and keep your towers alive. So, to a certain extent, tower defense works quite well here for the French. We'll have to see if VortiX goes for that. For now, it is just going to be an archer range being added by him, and there is the forward villager coming in here from Leenock. Uh-oh, disaster. Disaster for Leenock over here. That's the forward villager being intercepted by the horseman. And there's the scout for VortiX. He knows fully well that that villager is coming. He sees the spearman being nearby as well, but he's going to try and distract those forces with the scout and then loop around with the horseman. Look at that. Leenock knows what's happening. Leenock knows very well that those spearmen have to hug that villager. They need to make sure that that villager reaches its destination. And that's exactly what you're going to see here. First tower placed at a sort of neutral position for the time being for Leenock, establishing a forward foothold, a place where he can regroup, a place where he can basically assemble his forces before he starts pushing deeper into the opponent's base. Longbows using the extra range over the archers of the opponent, trying to pick them off from a distance. For now, however, VortiX is getting some nice shots on those spearmen, and the horsemen are once again coming in. They're trying to jump on the villager. The scouts also join the party, and the villager does get picked off. That's all that VortiX wanted to accomplish. He didn't want to take this fight here. He doesn't want to fight against spears, he doesn't want to fight against longbows, he just wants to kill the villager, and that he did. New villagers being pulled by Leenock right now, and honestly, I wouldn't mind 2 whales being pulled. Of course, that would weaken your economy even more, but if you have 2 villagers, it's a lot more difficult to pick off both, so you are more likely to be able to finish your towers. Looks like we're going to have just 1 archer range and the School of Cavalry working here for VortiX. He is sitting at 27 villagers over 24. Keep in mind, French train villagers faster by default, so there is going to be a slight edge in that department as well. And now the villager once again makes a run for it. No spearmen nearby to brace the impact of those horsemen. And now the archers taking the hill over here will get 1 spearman picked off. Horsemen now thinking about jumping on the longbows. Spearmen still in large numbers over here, however. Looks like VortiX is committed to take this fight. He's trying to pick off the spears, but ultimately he's going to lose his archers, and the spearmen are still alive. So it looks like he won't be able to kill the longbows, and the villager will also be able to make that tower. Scout gets picked off from Leenock, but he has a second one, so it's not the end of the world right now for the time being. The tower will be finished at the top of the hill, at least so it seems.
Nu ye last. Cometh on.
Tower does get finished, but it looks like the villager is going to get called off from the front lines. Little surprising over here if you think about that, because one would expect that Leenock is trying to press on to this forward position, drop a second tower, but it looks like he's not going to do that. This gives a very nice window for VortiX to once again just build up on that already existing eco lead. It's only 3 villagers discrepancy, however, so not a huge eco lead right now for VortiX, and I'm still somewhat puzzled on what exactly he's planning to do with French, because he's doing the right thing against English in this matchup. The thing that I'm a little curious about is what exactly his game plan was going into this game selecting French. Because one of the problems of the French is that they are going to commit a lot of resources to their army, and they don't have any major gathering bonus on berries or hunt or whatsoever, which means that their castle-ish timing isn't going to be spectacular. And on maps like this, if you play like defensive, so for example you're playing defensive with the Chinese, you're trying to either build up an eco lead, so you're playing 2 town centers, or you're playing Song Dynasty with the Chinese, or you're trying to go for a fast castle style build over here. And neither of those are happening right now for VortiX, so I'm curious to see what exactly his game plan is, because so far, he's doing the right thing fighting off the English, but I just don't see what his game plan is trying to win this game. Looks like it's going to be horsemen and archers for the time being, currently sitting at 300 food in the bank, and if you're Leenock, you might just want to consider going into Castle Age here. If you think about that, you have a good forward position. You could use this as a staging ground, mass some more forces as you go up, and go for that spearman longbow force that could be difficult for the French to fight. Looks like a horseman is trying to chase down one of the scouts. One thing that you have to consider is that Leenock already lost one of his scouts, and the second scout could be taken down. And if that happens, Leenock's vision will be limited. He's going to have that tower out here that's going to give him vision. It's also going to give him the network of castles bonus as the horsemen come in. But where are the spears? The spearmen were mispositioned, and VortiX is finding the perfect time to strike. 3 spearmen join the battle, but those can easily be picked off by so many archers, and that's exactly what's happening. The perfect battle is happening in the middle right now for VortiX. He's charging him with the cavalry, but the most important thing is that Leenock just doesn't have the spearmen to fight off the horsemen. I don't think Leenock was expecting this counterattack at all, and that would explain why we're seeing so low spearman numbers, and now the reinforcements are coming in quite rapidly for the French player. Horsemen and archers now diving straight underneath the town center. They're realizing that there's a chance to do a ton of damage here. Those villagers assembled right next to that lumber camp. They'll have to make a run for the town center, and the archers commit. The archers have to commit knowing that that's gonna be so many casualties for our red player Leenock here. He's losing villagers left and right. And VortiX is fully aware that he's going to lose his numbers as well, but he knows that the amount of damage that he could do here is going to compensate for all those losses that he's suffering from. He's wiping out the entire army of Leenock, and he's also wiping out his entire eco. And if those archers move to the north, they could get so many kills on that gold mine. That's exactly what we're about to see. Villagers will try to fight back as best they can, but basically the entire economy of Leenock right now is idle. Leenock is gonna have no economy working for him. VortiX did lose a lot of numbers over here, but the most important thing is that he was able to damage Leenock's eco in a quite convincing fashion. Now he's sitting at a 13 villagers lead, and that's exactly the type of game plan that I was asking about. What exactly are you planning? It looks like he was planning to build on the fact that Leenock is playing a little lower on the army department, because Leenock didn't want to push. Leenock wanted to play this one a little more passively, and in the end, Leenock didn't have the spearman number to hold off the horsemen, and in that key fight in the middle, the longbows got forced back, and from that point on, VortiX just had a big ball of archers that could commit against the town center. VortiX was fully aware of the fact that he's going to lose those archers, but he also knew that trading archers at this point to villagers is an acceptable trade for him right now. Because rebuilding archers is much easier than rebuilding your entire eco, and now it's 44 villagers over 29, and of course, French training villagers faster also means that this villager gap is just going to widen and widen. For now, VortiX is also using his map control to secure the berries on the right side. There is also a hunt to the south of it. He could also take that, but for now, he's just going to be satisfied by burning down that tower. And he's also going for a market, grabbing a blacksmith. With the French, he already has the melee attack upgrade for free from there. But of course, the big jackpot would be grabbing the range defense upgrade against the English and then ranged attack as well. And you're gonna wonder if he's going to try and utilize the military advantage that he has currently to try and drop a forward tower on that wood line. Because that's definitely something that you can think about at this point. He's got the army advantage. If he gets a forward tower up there, that would be devastating on those lumberjacks, but instead, he's just committing against this one, and there is an overchop over there for lumberjacks. Once again, the horsemen charge in, but this time around, seeing all those longbows come in for the defense, it looks like VortiX is just going to call off his forces, retreat. He's floating a ton of gold, ton of wood, so I gotta wonder if he's going to start balancing out his eco and work towards Castle Age, or maybe mixing some knights with some food he buys. But I'm not exactly sure what he's going to do with so much gold for the time being. Not a lot of farming eco operational either for Leenock, so it's not like he's going to be able to cut into that villager deficit by just having an insanely effective farming eco. Campfire upgrade on the way right now for Leenock to heal up those longbows, and it looks like a new angle will be attempted to attack from. For VortiX, he's going to try to strike from the right side, and that could be great, because Leenock has no vision there. He cannot see beyond that forest, I do believe. If we had the POV of Leenock, that would be helpful, but indeed, he didn't see this attack coming in, and VortiX knows very well that there is villagers to be picked up over there. 2 more villagers go down, the third one will get away here. But that's once again 2 villagers being taken down by VortiX, and he's slowly grinding down the opponent's economy. Now it's a 17 villagers lead, and from this point on, VortiX no longer has to be the aggressor. He can sit back and just wait for the opponent, knowing that he already has the villager lead. You have to consider that the English, once they get to Castle Age, they would probably go with the King's Palace, so they would start with 2 town centers going into Castle Age, and that means that they would be able to slowly climb back in villager count. So VortiX will need to be careful with that. He can't just let Leenock sit back and just go back onto 2 town centers using the King's Palace. But of course, Leenock is far away from Castle Age, so that's just a distant dream right now for Leenock. VortiX has a large window over here to do whatever he wants, basically. Although Leenock is assembling quite significant force, he's got the ranged attack and ranged defense upgrades as well. VortiX has all but 1 blacksmith upgrades for his units here. He's just now grabbing the melee defense upgrade for his units. He's got basically all the upgrades on the overlay. You can see horticulture, lumberjacking, wheelbarrow upgrade as well, and he's now researching the final blacksmith upgrade for himself over here. Currently, military numbers are looking slightly better for VortiX, 26 versus 23, and Leenock is realizing that he needs to make a push happen right now. He tried to pick off a villager underneath the town center, but that's not going to happen. Villager survives with low HP, and the problem right now for Leenock is that he no longer has that scout. And remember, that scout got picked off by a horseman, and he has no idea about these villagers. If he ever probes those berries with some longbows, he could find a great jackpot over there, but I don't think he will. He wants to go for a direct push, and for that, he's not going to be rewarded for the time being, and you do have the horsemen coming from behind. All the forces of Leenock are at the front line. The horsemen will loop around. Leenock did not expect this one, and these horsemen will come as a nasty surprise. The only thing that could have been better here for VortiX would have been one or two knights as well, because the knights would be doing so much more damage compared to the horsemen. So if these were knights, this would have been way more villagers killed. Still, ton of idle time on the eco of Leenock, and most importantly, he now has to address a different problem. The fact that the back of his base is also wide open for raiding. And behind this one, of course, VortiX is just building up that eco lead even more and more. 58 versus 38 is the villager count right now, so now we're looking at the 20 villagers discrepancy between the two players. For now, you have the farming eco being set up by Leenock, however, but we also have to keep something in mind. As I said, wood is limited on this map, and so far Leenock has been going for just longbows, spearmen, two very wood-heavy units. Now, truth being told, VortiX did the same thing here with the horsemen and archers, so both of these players could start running low on wood as early as Castle Age, and look at that. Is that Leenock going into Castle? It is. There's the King's Palace coming in, and that's his way to recover his villager losses. The problem is that he just invested a ton of resources into Castle Age, and there's a big force of archers now coming in, and that King's Palace is very much exposed over here. The numbers are way better for VortiX, and he's going to stop the progress of that King's Palace. VortiX knows very well that he needs to stop this one, or at least delay it as long as possible. He himself is not far away from Castle Age. He's going to have to camp this position and deny his opponent from getting into Castle Age. This is the spot to camp at right now. That's outside the range of the town center, and you could deny the King's Palace there. For the time being, villagers for Leenock once again being sent back to build the King's Palace, and the archers once again committing here. VortiX knows that he needs to slow this down, picks off one villager, picks off a second one, and it looks like he's going to commit underneath the town center once again. The numbers of Leenock are looking great here, so this is not a fight that VortiX can win, but for the time being, it's all about that delay game, and also the ability to pick off further and further villagers here, and that he succeeds in. Leenock down to 37 villagers. He needs to get that Castle Age going. On the way to Castle Age is going to be VortiX as well, dropping the guild hole as we speak. And it looks like that King's Pass is slowly being finished. Once again, VortiX is going to attempt a push here with the horsemen. His horsemen numbers are rather low right now, but it is just a buffer. The horsemen just buffered the arrow fire, and it is the archers doing the damage. Once again, 4 or 5 villagers are falling from Leenock, and he's struggling mightily to finish that King's Palace. Once it's up, he can slowly start grabbing that villager account upwards, because at this point, he's down by 32 villagers. It's double the villagers right now for VortiX. Leenock needs to find a way to finish that King's Palace, and then try to compensate for those villager losses. But that's going to be very difficult, because he lost so many villagers here. Looks like he's going to clean up the aggression in front of his base, but VortiX bought himself enough time to get to Castle Age, and now we're looking at VortiX in Castle as well, and his opponent is mostly longbows. This could be men-at-arms for him, this could be potentially just 4 knights, because there is barely any spearmen here for Leenock. Looks like it's going to be a siege workshop, and veteran archers as an upgrade also coming in here for VortiX. He is going to lose a couple of villagers on those berries here, potentially. Nice pickoffs from Leenock right now. And of course, VortiX wants to wait for the veteran upgrade to come in. Leenock just now up to Castle Age. VortiX now engaging in this fight here. If he can get a fight while he has the veteran upgrade and the opponent doesn't, that would be the jackpot. He's calling off his forces for the time being, but as you see, the veteran upgrade is almost finished. And with that, once he has it, he's going to turn back and fight. A mangonel is also being made, if I'm not mistaken, but it's still far from completion. Castle Age is in, and you would expect the veteran longbow upgrade to arrive very soon. It is being researched as we speak, so veteran upgrade will be in for the archers of both players. For now, the armies are rather even. In fact, Leenock has a slight advantage over the opponent, in terms of numbers at least. But the problem here for Leenock is that he's substantially outnumbered by villagers. 69 villas for VortiX, very nice. Whereas on the other side, only 38 for Leenock. He can come back in terms of villager count simply because he now has 2 town centers, but it's a long process. So this needs to be a quite long game for Leenock, for him to be able to come back into this one. Wars are coming up for VortiX over here. He's realizing that his flank is quite exposed and the longbows could just loop around, get some villager kills. VortiX is also a little low on the gold department, but now he has a mangonel. The problem that VortiX is facing now, I do believe, is that he isn't really initiating any fights, and while he has the villager lead, as I said, Leenock will be able to come back in the villager department, and keep in mind that once we get to this mid-Castle Age, late Castle Age, early Imperial Age stage, the English farming economy is really going to kick in. And of course, once you get to the Imperial Age, with the enclosures upgrade, the English player will be able to get a very nice gold trickle as well from those farms. So I feel like to a certain extent VortiX is on a timer over here. He's got a much better economy, but I still don't see the unit composition for him that will bring him victory. For now, it looks like we're seeing the barracks adding some men-at-arms here for Leenock. He's adding the clad armor upgrade, also mixing in some crossbows. Mangonel now pushing upwards. Looks like we also have a couple of veteran knights mixed in here for VortiX. The Royal Knights will work nicely over here, but you do notice something else on this screen as well. VortiX will have to fight for this gold mine. Because if you look at this gold, that's going to be heavily exposed. There's a backup gold mine on the left side. There's some red units moving towards those. I wonder if they just want to check if there is anyone there. If Leenock does that, that's a great move. There is no one home on that gold mine for the time being. But the fact that VortiX's gold miners are all going to be this exposed is a little concerning. Some crossbows being mixed in from both sides, as we do have some springolds going as well. Did you see that? That deer was just massacred by that springold out there. Poor little deer. What did he ever do to you? Army numbers getting closer and closer. Leenock is climbing back in the villager department as well. Some minutes ago, we could see 69 versus 35 villagers. Now we're looking at 54 versus 78, so the longer this game goes, the better this is going to be for Leenock, and still, I do believe the biggest problem for VortiX is his civilization. I still don't understand what exactly his game plan is with the French here, because, as I said, the French is a great all-around civilization, but there are some civs that are much more map-specific, and could be a lot more effective on this map. For example, the English, because the English are great with this one direct push. One of the problems that English struggle with a lot in Age of Empires 4 is mobility, or more precisely, lack of mobility for them. But on this map, you don't need a lot of mobility, and it's more about that direct push that the English are just so powerful with. More barracks being built, and I love the preemptive crossbowman addition here from Leenock. He's probably expecting some knights, potentially men-at-arms from being added. Against the English, knights make way more sense for the French, and I do see a monastery being dropped, so we're going to have a bit of a race towards the relics. I didn't see a monastery from Leenock just yet, so I don't think that he's ready to pick any of those up. Instead, he's focusing on military production, also grabbing some mangonels for himself. He's back on track with the villagers. Now it's 60 versus 83, and once again, VortiX is sitting back home, but this is allowing Leenock to boom back into the game, and once we get to Imperial, boy oh boy, that's where the power of the English really comes into play. Upgrades are relatively similar here in terms of economy. You do have the second lumberjacking upgrade in as well for Leenock. Those dots right next to the icons, these mean the level of the upgrade. So 2 dots means it's the Castle Age upgrade as opposed to VortiX's Feudal Age upgrade. Wheelbarrow is in for both, and now you see the mining upgrade also coming in for Leenock. So he's focusing a lot on his economy. He's using this relatively peaceful window to rebuild the economy he lost before, and this is something that VortiX is sort of having trouble with, because he isn't able to push Leenock right now, but also, Leenock is just allowed to boom back into the game. In 3 or 4 minutes, we could see Leenock having identical villager count to VortiX, which is a disaster for VortiX if you consider the fact that 10 minutes ago, he had double the villagers of his opponent. This game seemed to be lost for Leenock, but the problem right now for VortiX is that he isn't really able to push him. Looks like he has finally massed a big group of units, but his opponent also has the Network of Castles bonus, and Leenock wasn't idle either. Leenock was massing significant forces back at home as well. He's got the mangonels going as well. Springolds will be the target of those knights over here. VortiX will have to charge him with the knights, try to take down the siege weapons. Springolds will start opening up against each other, and the Springold numbers are better for VortiX here. He's going to take down one Springold, the second gets taken down. The third one could be exposed as well, and this is the big problem right now for Leenock. His Springold numbers are disappearing from the battlefield, and so far, VortiX was able to maintain all of his Springolds on the battlefield. Looks like he's going to get forced back as well because the meat shield is disappearing from in front of those archers and crossbows, but he was able to take down a substantial amount of Springolds from the opponent. Once again, it becomes a stalemate because that tower is helping so much for Leenock with the Network of Castles bonus, whereas on the other side you do have a keep in the middle for VortiX as a staging ground for this assault. Looks like Leenock is realizing that, okay, VortiX cannot push in the middle, so I will have to make sure I'm not getting raided to death, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's going to start walling off his base back at home. Looks like both sides are still massing up an army. Now the military population is looking better for VortiX. 58 versus 46 is his military count. He's slowly running out of that gold mine at the front as well, so he will have to go towards the left side. And I wonder if that red dot on the left side next to the relic is actually a scout from Leenock looking over that gold mine. Because I feel like right now we're entering a stage of stalemate, and a stalemate is something that has to be broken by someone. And whoever breaks that stalemate has a very good chance of winning the game. One way to break a stalemate would be a power spike to Imperial Age, and that's exactly what we're seeing. VortiX is on the way to Imperial with the Red Palace. Very ambitious position and very risky. If he loses control over this part of the map, and he loses the Red Palace, he's not gonna get to Imperial. However, if he gets up to Imperial Age, that Red Palace will provide so much firepower that it's going to be extremely difficult for the English player to take down. Looks like Leenock is potentially thinking about a counterattack now, but this gives a window for VortiX to make that Red Palace happen. And once we get to Imperial Age, the French will be a very powerful civilization, with the elite arbaletier, archers of course, potentially elite royal knights, and it looks like for a moment Leenock tried to go for a counterattack, but he's just going to bump into a layer of wall here. This will alert VortiX that there is a push coming his way. Wouldn't be surprised to see a stone wall being dropped behind this one. VortiX of course doesn't want to fight right now, he needs to wait for Imperial Age technologies, or alternatively he could send his knights into the base of the opponent and say, okay, you're up there on the north, you're quite far from defending your own base, so I might as well send my knights into your eco and start rampaging it. Vulture count is still in the favor of VortiX, but he's going to have to face off against all of those men-at-arms and longbows, supported by some crossbowmen pushing into his base. Looks like he's all the way back at home with the Springolds setting up. Mangonels are also out there. Those Mangonels are the key defensive weapons over here. They unleash 2 volleys, barely missing the group of Longbowmen, but the Longbows, of course, afraid of that Mangonel fire with no supporting Springolds to take down the Mangonels. They will just call this a day and retreat, and now you are seeing a potential Imperial Age army from VortiX starting to massacre those Castle Age units. VortiX is on the pursuit, and he's going to try to chase down as many units as he can. Ultimately, decides to call this a day and retreat because he wants to grab those Imperial Age technologies as we discussed. For now, it's 72 army versus 68. Leenock is not far away from Imperial either, and he could drop the Berkshire Palace. That would be a great way to sort of buffer the attack of the opponent, because as powerful as the Red Palace is for the French as a defensive landmark for Imperial Age, the Berkshire Palace is actually comparable, and Leenock wants to go into Imperial. There's a Trebuchet shelling the keep in the middle, but should be taken down rather easily by the Springolds. Villagers were pulled to repair the castle for the time being. Springolds opening up against the tower for the time being. Trebuchet was already taken down, so as expected, that castle will stand for VortiX. Leenock needs to get to Imperial. He needs a little more gold for that. I wonder if he has a market, because he needs to sell some wood to go up. The problem is, does he have his window to go up? Because the moment he starts aging up, VortiX will see that, and VortiX knows very well that he needs to stop that age-up process. There is the Wingard Palace coming in, not a landmark that you commonly see. It is a landmark that will allow you to get trebuchets at a very low discount, or well, not a very low discount, a very low price with a high discount. We'll talk about that in a brief moment. A very risky call for Leenock because he needs a defensive landmark. The Berkshire Palace would have helped so much holding off this assault. In the long run, the Wingard Palace can pay off, but it's not going to have an immediate effect. And that's the big problem right now for Leenock. I think he needed a landmark with an immediate effect out here, because he's going to get pushed over here on this side. Springolds will open up against the siege weapons of VortiX, and VortiX gets forced back for the time being. Precious seconds are won over here for Leenock. He's going to start trading off against those Springolds. Remember that VortiX already has the Imperial Age range upgrade on those Springolds, so he currently outranges the ones of his opponent. Mangonel setting up as well for Leenock will be short-lived, taken down by the Springolds. Leenock still needs to grab the Imperial Age technologies for himself. 71 army against 71, so head-to-head in the military department are the two players. If Leenock holds off this assault, I think he's going to take over this game, because from this point on, the English Imperial Age power is something that's going to be difficult for the French to match up against. But we're looking into elite knights increasing in numbers on the battlefield, and soon you will have to face off against those if you're Leenock. He's in the danger of losing the King's Palace at the front right now. A lot of Springolds set up for his opponent as well. No Culverins available for either of these players right now. Probably the Wingard Plus is already making the Wingard army, which is an army that is composed of multiple types of units. Spearmen, longbows, men-at-arms, knights. It's one of each, but most importantly, the trebuchet. The thing with the Wingard army is that it doesn't look spectacular and it takes a lot of time to make. But one thing that's very effective with is cost. If you look at the combined cost of those units, that's hundreds of food, wood, and gold. And you get that for a very low large discount. I think it cost like 100 food, 200 wood, 200 gold, or something like that. So even just for a trebuchet, it's worth it. Because the trebuchet itself, especially for the English, is very valuable, and the trebuchet is an expensive siege weapon. So as you see, you're getting a longbowman, a knight, a man-at-arms, and a trebuchet for minimal cost. And the trebuchet with the shattering projectiles is a weapon that can do area damage on the enemies. Springolds will roll up trying to take down the trebuchet. Treb gets another shot out, but the Springolds are quite exposed over here. The knights, the spearmen, will try to throw some torches. And you see, this might be an overextension here from VortiX. Here comes the army of Leenock. He's got the elite men-at-arms with the ironclad armor. But you gotta wonder if that is enough against all those arbaletiers, the elite knights. And one thing that Leenock doesn't have is armor-piercing power. He doesn't have a direct answer to all those elite knights. He doesn't have a direct answer to the arbaletier, aside from the fact that he could pick them off with those longbows if the longbows don't get massacred by the knights. Now you're seeing some cannon appear on the battlefield. Looks like Leenock is able to hold this position. As the crossbow numbers increase, he's going to be able to start taking down those knights, and when he takes down the knights, the longbows will be able to pick off the arbaletier. For now, the arbaletier will be called off, and it looks like it's a retreat for the time being for VortiX. English once again holding this position, the very thing that they are the best at. Holding a very good defensive position, and that Vanguard army, as you see, it takes quite a lot of time to build it, but it's also going to be an army that costs so low resources, especially with the trebuchets, and of course the knights also help. So one knight, one man-at-arms, and a trebuchet by itself is already quite valuable. Longbowman is a nice added extra. Keep being built on the northern side of the map right now by VortiX. He's working towards that big gold mine. He already has the one on the right side. Leenock, of course, doesn't need that much mineable gold because he's going to have the gold trickle from the farming. And at this point, that's what Leenock has to play for. Starve his opponent out of gold. Because the French army is very gold heavy, especially if you're making that many royal knights. Of course, it's going to be difficult to starve VortiX out of gold right now because he's yet to start mining that 8,000 gold on the north, and the other big gold mine on the right side is not something that he has been mining for a long time. So I would think that VortiX at least has like 10-15,000 gold available still to mine. But once all those gold mines are dry, the English forever farming with the gold is going to be extremely impactful because Leenock has infinite gold right now. Looks like Leenock was thinking about colonizing that gold mine as well. That will be a quite underwhelming effort by those villagers, as Leenock is going to get forced back by the keep. He's got trebuchets to fight this one, but he has to be careful. Stone walls are being built on the right side. Nice move from VortiX. He has picked up one relic so far, and there's a second one he secures this way. Leenock has 2 relics right now under his control. Both players in the 190 range with the population. Sacred sites are being captured by VortiX, however, and if you look at the positions of those sacred sites, especially if these stone walls go up on the north, suddenly this could be concerning for Leenock. That stone wall on the north will prevent Leenock from getting to this sacred site. This sacred site on the right side is also protected by a stone wall, and there is no way for Leenock to access that from the middle. That's the big thing. There is no crossing over here, so there is no way to go out here or go out here. Those stone walls will hold off the counterattack of Leenock for a long time. Leenock would have to go all the way through here to hit that sacred site, or all the way through here to hit that sacred site. And neither of those are currently an option. So VortiX could very well play for Sacred Site victory over here. The key thing is holding that middle Sacred Site. Trebuchets are now opening up here. Long-range siege weapons, and look at the amount of flaming arrows coming out from the longbows. The firepower seems to be immense over here for Leenock. Mangonels are opening up against the men-at-arms of Leenock here, but the men-at-arms just don't care. They rush down the siege weapons. They're focusing the Mangonels. Mangonels being forced all the way back, and with the crossbows and longbows support, suddenly Leenock is pushing this one. And the longbows are now able to target the arbaletier, which is just turning into a massacre at this point. Mangonels once again setting up, but the valiant men-at-arms are still picking them off. One Mangonel remains here for VortiX. It's still not set up. Now it's going to fire a volley into those longbows, and it looks like that volley is going to be enough to force back the Mangonel. And with that, so many longbows falling to that Mangonel fire in the northern part of the map. Rather even fight, if you look at the overall casualties. It looked quite decent for Leenock. He had a massive amount of army. Men-at-arms overrun the Mangonels, and VortiX was forced back, but in the end, VortiX was able to get some nice Mangonel hits, and that decimated the ranks of those longbows. On the right side, you're going to see some knights moving in because Leenock overchopped that wood line, so there is going to be a nice raiding attempt here from VortiX. He's going to get some villager kills for himself. Not so significant as it was before, but as you see, VortiX is capping the sacred sites, and that's going to be a big thing. It's going to be a big thing because of the gold income, and it's going to be a big thing because of the sacred site victory, of course. Crossbows will adjust their positions from Leenock. They will take down most of those raiding knights over here. Army numbers looking very good for Leenock, 95 over 64. But what is he going to do against the forces of VortiX in the middle? Because that's a very strong defensive position. The Red Palace and, of course, the defensive castle in the middle. As you see, both players are starting to run low on wood. And that's where the Wingard Palace will have its second effect here. The trebuchets will be very cheap if you make them with the Wingard Palace, which means that you will continuously have a supply of cheap, long-range siege weaponry capable of destroying defensive emplacements like castles or the Red Palace. On the right side, it looks like VortiX is going to push in through that hole in the wood line. He's just trying to deny as many trees as possible, because he knows fully well that now the most precious resource available on the map is going to be wood. He's chopping down the stealth forests to the south, because he's realizing that the stealth forest is the only leftover wood that's still accessible for him. So you will see those stealth forests being all taken out over here, this one as well. These, I think, have already been chopped down. So at this point, that's all about the wood income that you can get. 9 minutes remaining on the Sacred Site countdown. Here comes the horde of infantry once again. No staggered formations, so Leenock is playing with fire over here because Mangonel fire could wipe out his entire army over here. Mangonel's nowhere to be found on the battlefield just yet. First Mangonel opens up over here. It's going to retreat for a time being, and you see some crossbowmen are also coming from the right side. Mangonels will focus those down. They'll be wiped out very easily, but this also means that the keep in the middle will fall. It falls to the trebuchet fire, and now the Mangonels can jump on all of those longbows. In the middle, men-at-arms will try to push the Mangonels away for the time being, and the men-at-arms are actually overrunning the ranks of Leenock right now. Crossbows and arbaletier under the town center. Or what is that? Not as a town center. It's a Red Palace. The Red Palace, underneath the Red Palace, are the arbaletier. That is a very strong defensive position, and you see all those longbows getting wiped out by the Mangonel fire. Great move over here from Leenock to take down the keep in the middle. But now, the trebuchets are shelling the Red Palace, and while the Red Palace has a great range, it's not going to reach those trebuchets. Arbaletier pushing up, they need to secure some ground for those Springles. The Springles need to roll up and take down the trebs. But once again, the melee infantry and cavalry is coming in here for Leenock, focusing down the Mangonels and focusing down all of those Springles. The trebuchets are still standing strong. Longbows not under fire by the Mangonels right now. Mangonels trying to get closer and closer to those longbows, but they're getting picked apart by the men-at-arms. One Mangonel goes down. The second Mangonel is under fire once again. Flaming arrows help a lot as well for the archers to deal with those Mangonels. Beautiful jukes on the left side by Leenock, avoiding the rocks from the Mangonels. Once again, juking away from those shots. Gets a big hit on top of his units though. And now his army once again is decimated. His ranks falling down to 30 units, 20 units, those Mangonels finally getting some good connections, and in just a blink of an eye, the army of Leenock disappears from the battlefield. All of those longbows, all of those crossbowmen are now gone. Leenock down to 23 army, and VortiX is still sitting at 44. Leenock has some resource bank to operate with, but if you look at VortiX's one, that's much larger. And the problem right now for Leenock is that he was building his army so heavily on those longbows that are now wood heavy, and it's going to be very difficult to replenish. The arbaletier still standing strong in the middle, firing away on those men-at-arms. And now Springles will trade blows against each other over here. But this is once again a position that VortiX is holding, and the Sacred Site countdown is going further and further. Now it's just 8 minutes left on the clock, and now the arbaletier are appearing in larger and larger numbers. What can Leenock do against this? The arbaletier, those would be exposed to Mangonel fire, those would be exposed to horsemen, but horsemen are wood heavy, Mangonels are wood heavy, and VortiX has Springles to take down Mangonels with. Currently, our English player has no direct response to those arbaletier. His own Mangonels, the longbows, would work, but because Leenock has limited access to wood, he can't just spam those all day, all night. Bombards are now being called up to try and take the fight in the middle, as 7.5 minutes is remaining on that countdown. Once again, VortiX is assembling his forces, Mangonels, Springles, all set up. New Trebuchet is on the battlefield, but you see, VortiX is realizing that he needs to get that castle up in the middle and just try to force his opponent to make a move. The Springald gets 2 hits on the Bombard, will not be able to land the third one, however. VortiX looking like he's cancelling that castle right next to that Sacred Site. He thinks twice before dropping it. You have to be very careful of how you drop your castles at this point. It looks like Leenock isn't going to contest the 2 Sacred Sites on the sides. Instead, he's just going to focus on the one in the middle. So everything is going to come down to a battle in the middle. But the French are very good at defending certain well-fortified positions as well, especially if the Red Palace is nearby. Now, the Red Palace isn't directly protecting the Sacred Site, which is definitely helpful for Leenock, but it's a great staging ground and a fallback option for VortiX. VortiX, once again, with massive amounts of Arbaletier. And on the other side for Leenock, he's back to 72 army. His numbers are looking great. Bombards are setting up, taking down some of the Springolds, but the Bombards are also being picked apart by all of those Springolds out there. Looks like Leenock is launching another assault to the middle. He has already damaged that castle out there, and he's trying to send in the infantry first to try and deal with the siege weapons. Arbaletier setting up, and they are just going to start massacring all those long. When I look at the cavalry charge coming in, this is not something that Leenock expected. All those cavalry will be jumping on the longbowmen, and more importantly, they are going to jump on the siege weapons. Right now, VortiX is keeping control over the Sacred Site in the middle, because he is having units inside just like his opponent, and those men-at-arms are getting absolutely wiped out by all of those Arbaletier. Some crossbows are on the battlefield as well for VortiX. But at this point, the biggest problem right now for Leenock is that he's getting overrun in the middle. The knights are enough to take down most of those crossbows for Leenock here. Leenock has some crossbows mixed into his army, but it's insufficient to take down that many fully upgraded elite knights. And now, it's a full steamroll by VortiX. He's realizing that there is blood in the water. This is the time to strike. He can take down those trebuchets. He can start pushing deeper and deeper into the opponent's base, wipe out the mangonel, and just buy himself some time. Buy himself time to fortify the middle even more. And look at VortiX, he's got 2,000 stone in the bank. I'm fairly certain that his guild hall is set on stone because he just wants to fortify the middle now. It's not like it mattered, to be honest, because now Leenock is out of resources. He's got some units queued up, but those units are just trickling in, and the Arbaletier are just picking them apart. No siege remaining for Leenock. He's down to 130 population. Down 2 games. In match point for VortiX, it looks like VortiX is going to close out this game 3-0, because now Leenock is running out of options. 5 minutes remaining on that Sacred Site countdown. But as you can see, VortiX no longer cares about that. VortiX knows that he can just push into the opponent's base, inflict as much damage as he can, because he knows very well that Leenock is going to struggle recovering from that. And every second Leenock is spending on recovering, VortiX will be able to capitalize on those Sacred Sites. The Trebuchet setup with shattering projectiles could do a lot of damage to that clustered up group of Arbaletier, and you gotta be careful over there because those Arbaletier could be wiped out easily by the Trebuchet. Still, large group of Arbaletier standing in the middle of Leenock's base. Leenock gets another rock out from that Trebuchet, but it's targeting the Knight, which isn't going to be super effective. New wave of Knights now coming in. And the supply of forces for VortiX is just a lot more consistent than it is for Leenock. Leenock sitting at 17 army as opposed to 60 from the opponent. And just look at the flood of units coming in here for VortiX. He knows very well that it's all about that pressure. Keep up the pressure, keep picking up the newly built forces, because you can reinforce this battle much easier than your opponent can. Leenock, he's getting forced back into his base, 85 population. Barely any villagers left, no army left at all. Farms are being burnt down over here. And remember, there's only 4 minutes left on that Sacred Site countdown. There is no way that Leenock is going to recover from this one. It's too far gone. His base is an absolute train wreck. Leenock taps out, and VortiX wins a very grindy, very long game over here in game number 3. A game where he had a substantial advantage. Ton of villagers advantage here in Feudal Age. But then he had to grind for it late game. Ultimately, he secured the map control, he secured the Sacred Site, and he was the one forcing the opponent to attack. And in many ways, the playstyle that VortiX utilized over here is reminiscent to what you would see from the French on King of the Hill. Because in that scenario, it would be the same idea. You control the Sacred Site, force your opponent to make a move. The only difference is that on King of the Hill, you have 1 Sacred Site only, whereas on this map you have 3, but out of those 3, you had 2 guarded by stone walls, never contested by Leenock. So once again, it just came down to that one battle at the middle, trying to take that Sacred Site, but that is extremely difficult against that many Springolds, Bombards, Castle Fire, and of course Mangonel Fire, ultimately resulting in VortiX taking the set over here, and with that moving upwards in the Swiss bracket, whereas for Leenock, who started out quite nicely, is now going to start falling in the brackets in the Swiss stage. He's going to have to gather his thoughts and recover for tomorrow, because if he ends up losing tomorrow, he could be in the danger of getting eliminated, whereas for VortiX, after a rather pedestrian start to the tournament, he lost 3-1 to Beastie QT. Now he's moving upwards. He took down Lucifron. Now he takes down Leenock. And he's finding himself at the higher part of the Swiss bracket.